Hi, this is Chris from the Hay River Berry Farm, and this is our third Haskap Orchard, and this one's mainly is all planted with Haskap plants that bloom later in the season, and we harvest these later in the season. So we compare these plants to our earlier varieties, and we can see some really big differences with these plants. Mainly is how much fruit these guys produce. So these plants really are not that large yet, and you can see that on every node from new growth from the last year, you'll see berries, and there's just clusters of them. And this plant needs to be pruned from the ground up a little bit because the branches are laying on the ground, and that's not ideal for sure. So we will do some pruning on these guys in the fall. But you can see, like this new growth here from this year, all these nodes here, you want them to produce fruit next year. And you can see here, this is new growth from last year, and you can see almost every node is covered in berries. And that's really what you want to see. I mean, you can see some of these guys up here, they're just absolutely loaded with fruit. And they're just a small plant. I mean, these guys are 2 to 3 feet tall. Maybe some of them just getting a little bit over 3 feet. These will be 6 foot high when they're fully grown. And they're a couple years away from that height. So from what we can see here and what we can see from our varieties on our earlier fruiting varieties, we know that we have problems with our climate in that we can't use these early blooming varieties. Even mid-blooming varieties are going to be an issue for us. They're just not going to ever produce enough berries. Not what we want anyway. And we see that, I've been hearing that a lot too. Like a lot of people, like I say, how many pounds per plant should I get? And you hear growers in Saskatchewan or Alberta or Manitoba that are in a grow zone of 2 or 3 getting 9 pounds off of a particular variety. And it's just, you really have to look at what grow zone you're in and to know how these plants are going to be effective and which varieties that you want to pick from. Another new thing that we did this year is we reduced the amount of pins to keep our netting down in the rows, and it worked beautifully, this different method. So what we do is we just put 1 pin by each post and then 1 pin midway, and then we use this lead filled rope. This is a rope with lead core in the middle of it, and then there's rope all the way around it, so there's no lead exposed. And the lead is quite safe. It doesn't, it's not going to deteriorate in your fields, and suddenly you have lead poisoning everywhere, and you're not touching the lead with your hands. It's all wrapped in rope. And this type of rope is actually used for fishing. On the bottom of gill nets, for example, seine nets. And I actually got the rope from a fisherman friend of mine who had some old gill nets he was no longer using, and I just cut the rope out of it. So instead of the rope going to landfill, we now use it to keep our bird netting down while the grass grows through it. And it worked perfectly. We hardly had any birds get into our rows this year. So we were quite happy with that new addition. And it was very quick to install, and it's very easy to remove. A lot less bending, and much easier to work with. So another thing too is you can see these are Maxine Thompson's varieties, by the way. This one here, you can see how easy it is to also pick these guys fresh, and they have nice large berries. They look really good. That's a pretty good size fruit, and these are really good tasting berries. What I find with these ones is that the skin is very thin on these ones and very delicate, and they make excellent fresh eating berries. Mechanically harvesting these ones, I'm not 100% sure. We do see them if they fall from a height that they sometimes split open. But I think if you harvest them really early in the morning when the fruit's cooler, it may be okay. It's just one of those things. Different varieties have different attributes, and so far in our grow zone, which is about 7A, 7B, it's supposed to be 6A, 6B, but it's closer to 7A, I think. It depends. Some winters we get colder weather, some winters we don't. But we had a really bad spring this year, and all of our earlier blooming varieties like Indigo Gem, Tundra, Berry Blues, just the yield from those was terrible. And it was, when I watched them, they were all blooming out of sync with each other. They weren't blooming very much. They had a lot of fall bud break last fall. Where these plants, no problem. And that's really the conditions that we're looking at here. But we know now which varieties we have to work with in order to make, a successful Haskap orchard. And the varieties that we did pick in the beginning, well, on the advice that we were given, which was bad advice, of course, we have to replace those varieties if we want to get our production up. And we will. We're going to replace them with varieties that work here. That's it for this one. Thanks.